The Anglo-Norman invasion of Ireland occurred in the late 12th century, as Anglo-Normans and Cambro-Normans steadily took control of extensive territories. This led to claims of sovereignty by the English monarchs. The Anglo-Normans asserted invasion over Gaelic Ireland, which was made up of multiple kingdoms, with a High King asserting dominance over many of the other rulers. It was a watershed in Ireland's history, marking the beginning of almost 800 years of British presence in Ireland.
The Anglo-Normans originated from Vikings who settled in Normandy, adopted French culture, and then conquered England. In 1066, after establishing themselves as the ruling class in England, this group became known as Anglo-Normans, a blend of their Norman and Anglo-Saxon heritage. They later expanded and extended their journeys, conquests as you would say, to Wales and Ireland, bringing their own legal system, architecture and customs, and eventually integrating with the local population.
In May 1169, Anglo-Norman mercenaries landed in Ireland at the request of Dermot MacMurrough, the deposed King of Leinster, who sought their help in regaining his kingship. They achieved this within weeks and raided neighbouring kingdoms. This military intervention was sanctioned by King Henry II of England. In return, Dermot had sworn loyalty to Henry and promised land to the Normans.
Richard Strongbow, the Earl of Pembroke, landed in 1170. Strongbow wedded Dermot's daughter, and they took control of the significant Norse-Irish towns of Dublin and Waterford. Strongbow gained Leinster, which the King of Leinster had promised him before he had passed away in May of 1171. The majority of the Irish kingdoms besieged Dublin under the leadership of the High King Rory O'Connor, while Norman held Waterford and Wexford were also targeted. The Norsemen were able to maintain control over these areas.
In October 1171, King Henry landed with a large army to assert control over both the Anglo-Normans and the Irish. This intervention was supported by the Roman Catholic Church, who saw it as a means of ensuring Irish religious reform and a source of taxes. At the time, Irish marriage laws conflicted with those of the broader church, and the Gregorian reform had not been fully implemented. Henry granted Strongbow Leinster as a territory, declared the Norse-Irish towns to be Crown land, and arranged to reform the Irish church.
The Gregorian reforms. They were, brought about, I suppose, in a sense, by Pope Gregory VII. Now, the central issue here is this, is that, which has already been stated, that Ireland, through the invasion, which would come a little bit later than this period, through the invasion of the Anglo-Norman invasion, it would cause trouble and problems that would probably extend to about 800 years. But yeah, we're fighting a battle on two fronts here, because we have a physical battle which will take place very shortly from this period, but also from the decisions that's made by Pope Gregory, we will have battles, or men will, right up until this moment in time. Because although he was not responsible, he declared himself not responsible for bringing in compulsory celibacy, which is part of this reform. It wasn't the only part of the reform, but it was part of the reform he did become a very pioneer of pushing forward this compulsory celibacy that he believed was instrumental in the betterment of the reforms. Gregory did not introduce, as was said, celibacy. He never did that, of the priesthood, of the church. But however, he took up the struggle with great energy, and more than his predecessors. In 1074, he published a papal letter absolving people and for their obedience to the bishops who had allowed married priests. The next year, he was basically took up an action against married priests and deprived these people of their revenue. Both the campaign against priestly marriage also provoked widespread resistance. Now the problem here is that who is he reforming against, and what is the reform about? Why is this reform, and why in this particular period of time? Well, there's only one way of looking at that. If he opens the old texts within the ancient scriptures and reads when God says, "Go forth and multiply," there is a strong emphasis here that it is the will of God to procreate, to go forth and multiply. The argument they would have would be, yeah, but not under a priestly order. Yeah, but Paul writes later on, he says, and some will abandon the faith. They will follow things taught by demons, and they will force people to abstain from marriage. So marriage was a godly institution. So basically what Gregory's doing here is he's reforming against the eternal word of God. Not a good start.
At first glance, you'll encounter grand fortresses, fairy tale castles, and trails rich in legend.
From all accounts, 64 in total, with mountain peak views.
It is also a church parish within the Roman Catholic Archdiocese and lies in the historic barony of Clan William. The town was established in medieval times and emerged as a population hub in the early 13th century.
County Tipperary's history is marked by its formation in 1328, making it the earliest county in Ireland, and its status as a palatinate granted to the Earls of Ormond. It was a frequent battleground for Gaelic and later Norman feuds, and was heavily impacted by the 17th century Cromwellian conquests, the Great Famine, and later uprisings against British rule.
The battle occurred in October 1174 and was an important conflict during the Anglo-Norman invasion of Ireland.
The Irish forces, commanded by High King Rory O'Connor, overcame an Anglo-Norman expedition led by Earl Richard Strongbow, compelling the English army to withdraw.
There's no possible way could we comprehend the violence that took place in Tipperary in that battle and what it entails and the ferociousness of it all. And the reality is that the sad part is that was part of life for the people that lived there in Tipperary in 1174.
The 17th century invasion by Cromwell served as a significant battlefield, particularly highlighted by the siege in 1650. Hugh O'Neill's forces capitulated to Cromwell after causing substantial losses.
This campaign in 1650 was part of the broader conquest that ensued after the 1641 Irish Rebellion. This resulted in widespread destruction of the land and its people, along with significant land seizures and redistribution.
Before and after the siege, Cromwell's forces targeted other important towns in Tipperary. Brutal sieges and scorched earth tactics characterized the overall campaign. This devastated the region and led to a significant loss of life. The Cromwellian conquest in the 17th century significantly transformed the social and economic situation in Tipperary. It led to the extensive seizure of land from the Catholic Irish. This resulted in altered patterns of land ownership by English settlers.
Tipperary's history is very violent, tragic, but also courageous, and yet it had to enter into the famine years also. But however, statistic tells us today that over 600,000 people visit Tipperary each year, grossing somewhere in the region, if the figures are right, of 52 million in revenue from tourism, which would be the Rocket Castle, which is probably one of the most famous of them all. What I'm simply saying is, it emerged. It emerged victorious. It overcame all its challenges, all its battles, all its wars, and became one of Ireland's most attractive places for people to visit.
Up to mighty London came an Irishman one day. As the streets are paved with gold, sure everyone was gay, singing songs of Piccadilly, Strand and Leicester Square.